Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy and welcome to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, here today to give my review on Assassin's Creed, which is the 2016-2017 for us in the UK action-adventure film directed by Justin Kurzel, starring Michael Fassbender, Marion, Cotillard and Jeremy Irons. This is actually a very interesting one because we all know the story now with video game movies and how they pretty much never work. And if you're going by modern examples, if you look at last year's film, Warcraft, which granted some people liked, it did very well in China. You can check my review out for that, by the way, if you scroll through some of our old videos. I didn't care for that movie at all. And the problem, I think, was that it was catered much more towards people who had already played the game and didn't really bring in many newcomers. It bombarded you with information from the game. And on the flip side with this one, Assassin's Creed is a video game franchise that I have followed since it began. I haven't played the two recent entries on the PS4, which is Unity and Syndicate, but I did play it from the very first Assassin's Creed on PlayStation 3 right up until Assassin's Creed Rogue, and then I think that's when it jumped to PS4. So nevertheless, I am a fan of this franchise. I own all the games up until that point, and this was a movie that once I heard it was being made, I was very interested by it because unlike many other video game franchises, I could absolutely see this being a film. And in fact, when I was playing it myself, I kept thinking how cinematic many of the missions are, and the landscapes and the action and how frenetic and fast-paced it is. It could very, very easily blend onto the big screen. So when this initially got confirmed, I was very much looking forward to it. And then you start hearing details about who's directing it, who's starring in it. And Justin Kurzel was confirmed, who directed the 2015 film Macbeth. Again, you can find our review for that on our channel. It was a film that I didn't care for. It was a very well-made film, beautiful cinematography, fantastic music, really atmospheric with some good performances. But I didn't like it because I'm a fan of William Shakespeare and the text of William Shakespeare, and I didn't feel it was a good adaptation. Nevertheless, it was a completely competently made movie, and then you hear cast members from that movie, like Michael Fassbender, Marion, Cotillard, joining this movie as well. I don't know if they were contractually obligated to come back or what the ins and outs were. Jeremy Irons as well, who's a great talent. I was looking forward to it, and trailers come out, still positive. It visually looks great in terms of the location shooting, the parkour, everything like that looked amazing. And even some of the tweaks that they made to like the Animus, which is the machine that the character in this film, Callum, goes into, which is where he relives the memories of his ancestors. They changed it in this one from the game. In the game, it's more or less just a bed that you lie back on, and then his consciousness is transported, and he relives the original life of his ancestors. In this movie, they made it a lot more kinetic. They had this big machine he was hooked up to and that moved him around, and he was reenacting exactly the same movements. I enjoyed changes like that, and I also liked, and I will commend them for this as well, for not directly copying the main story, character, and setting of the original game. I like that they gave it an original setting that we haven't seen in the Assassin's Creed universe before, brand new character, but still tied it into that pre-existing history. I thought that was the best move for it, and I commend them for that. However, reviews started to come out for it, and I know I'm a little bit late to the party on this one. There have been a lot of other films that have come out in between. It's been finding time to get to a showing for this one. Finally saw it today, and then this was coming out, reviews were surfacing, and it's currently sat on a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. Every critic I've seen pretty much hated this movie or thought it was very average and lacked the potential. And if I'm going to go over to my overall thoughts now, I'm kind of in agreement with them. Now, as always, this review will be split into two sections with spoiler-free and spoilers. Haven't really got all that much to say on spoilers, but I will let you know when I get to that section. So the plot for this movie, for anyone who doesn't know, is about a character called Callum Lynch, played by Michael Fassbender, who is taken in by a mysterious science lab called Abstergo Industries, who put him in a machine called the Animus, where he can relive the memories of his ancestors, and they use him to try and track down an ancient artifact called the Apple of Eden, which, if attained by them and is attained by the Templars, will give them the power to control free will itself. Along the way, he relives the memories of his ancestors who were assassins, and then in modern day gets caught up in a war between the assassins and the Templars. Believe me, that plot sounds a lot more interesting than how it plays out in the movie. But if I'm going to start off with the cast itself, Michael Fassbender, Marion Cotillard, Jeremy Irons, as I said, all phenomenal talents. Even Brandon Gleeson shows up in this movie as well, who's a tremendous actor. Talent-wise, this movie is perfect. However, and I'm going to kind of have this comment for all of the main actors in this movie, they all turn in such tired performances. And I think a lot of that is down to, which is my biggest problem for this movie, is that the story is very weak. The actual premise is great, but the story in the context of the film is very weak. and there are no character moments. Really, what we watch play out is exposition, Callum learning how to use the Animus, a little quick action scene in the past, and then just rinse repeat to the ending. There's no moments where Callum is really questioning himself or having any meaningful exchange with any other character where we really get to see his personality. In all honesty, he is very much like the character from the video game Desmond Miles, who is one of the most uninteresting, bland and cardboard cutout video game protagonists I've ever seen. So in that respect, it's a very faithful adaptation. But I mean, Michael Fassbender is such a good actor, and you can see his range. If you look at films that he's been in before, like Inglourious Basterds, or even the X-Men films, just like First Class especially, or Days of Future Past, he's great, and he can really bring that emotion when given the material to do so, and I don't think he was in this movie. Marion Cotillard as well, great. She's great at playing a bad guy or a kind of anti-hero character. In films such as Allied or Inception, she always has that mysterious quality to her, and you do see signs of that in this movie. And in all honesty, her character is probably the most interesting one in this film. She flips between being a mentor and a teaching figure to Callum when she's introducing him to the machine and how it works and what their ultimate goal is. And also there's a darker side to her where she might be vying for power or vying for control. But it's all very surface level. And with all that material there, you could have a very compelling character there with a conflict and a turmoil, but we really don't get anything involved, and it's such a shame because I know she could handle that material well. You've got Jeremy Irons in this movie too, who plays the CEO of Abstergo Industries. You know what? His performance is fine. It's absolutely fine. It's always good to see Jeremy Irons in a flick, whether he is playing a serious role or a completely cartoony villain like he did in the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I would say that his character in this movie is somewhere between those two poles. You can tell that he definitely is having a lot of fun with the role, but there isn't really any substance to his character. He's just kind of there. He's very villainous in his dialogue. He's just like, I want the apple of Eden to control free will and give it to some shadowy higher-ups. That's really it, and there's not a lot to his character, and that, as I said, is my biggest problem. The story is very weak, but if you'd have gone into these characters and you fleshed them out more, and you devote more time to them, more meaningful conversations, getting inside their head, letting the audience connect with them, this is a film that could have had real potential. And it's a shame because, don't get me wrong, this film isn't awful. I didn't hate this movie. It's just a very, very dull experience. And it's a shame because there is so much that you could do with the Assassin's Creed franchise, and even better the games in some respects. Take that material, because the games aren't completely in depth with character. It is for some of the assassins in the flashback sequences, in the relived memories, but the main character, not really all that much. I didn't care for Desmond in the video games or anything like that. So this would have been your chance to take that concept and improve upon it. And in many respects, it was very much the same. And in some respects, even inferior as well. So let's get to the main thing that was going to get audiences into this film and fans of the video game as well. If anyone's seen any behind-the-scenes footage or featurettes on this film or anything like that, you know that Justin Kurzel, the director, liked to shoot as much in camera as possible. He's a big proponent for location shooting, and the locations in this movie are incredible. Filmed on location in Malta, in Spain, in London, and it all looks great. You feel like you're there. It's not all a digital landscape. Some shots are, but they're blended incredibly well. And also the stunt work. There was an amazing featurette where they show how they film the leap of faith, they call it in the video game, which is the huge swan dive they do off a tall building, usually into a bale of hay, which is just in the most convenient place. But they showed them filming that, and it broke some kind of record, I think, or it was the highest jump stunt-wise in a film for so many decades. And it looked amazing how they actually filmed that. They took a stunt performer up there and actually did that and shot it. However, when you get it in the movie, it does look like it's been pasted over with a lot of motion blur. The background in the actual jump is all digital by the looks of it, so it doesn't look as good as it did in the featurette when they filmed it. It doesn't look like it has that practical, real-life quality to it, which is a shame because they did all that effort to make it a possibility, and then when you see it in the final movie, it doesn't have any of that awe or sense of wonder. You know, like when you saw Dark Knight for the first time and that truck actually flips, and you can tell it was a real truck. They actually filmed that in that street, and it looked amazing, and it's still jaw-dropping watching that scene now. But this should have had that kind of impact, and it didn't. Now, a lot of the parkour stuff in this film is incredible to watch, and the actual hand-to-hand combat, when you can see the choreography, is amazing, and it really does generate that sense of the game and what it feels like to play that game. There is a scene in this movie where Michael Fassbender's escaping as the assassin in the past flashbacks, and you know, he's doing all the running over the rooftops and jumping on ledges and bouncing off buildings, and you really do want to just pick up like a PlayStation controller from the seat of the theatre and just move the character around. It does give you that good video game quality to it. However, one of the biggest disappointments with this film in terms of its action is the sheer amount of shaky cam and close-up shots. There are many scenes in this film, there's especially one that you can see in the trailer, which is a cart chase, and I couldn't tell where the characters were situated, which cart they were in. I couldn't tell who was attacking who. It was filmed so intrusively and just so close up that you really could, it was just a blur. You were seeing like close-up body parts, just a blur. And it's a shame because you can tell of how many hours they would have put into that choreography for the fighting. And you just want the camera, you want to like bodily pick up the camera and pull it out so you can just see this beautiful action take place. There are some great shots where the camera is pulled out. That's mostly in the running scenes over the rooftops. But the actual fighting really left a lot to be desired. I love to see a good sword fight, a good choreographed one. And you can't take in the beauty of that or the hard work. So it's kind of a yin-yang situation with this movie in that many of the shots of the parkour are fantastic, but the actual combat isn't. And it's really irregular when it crops up as well. It almost feels like they had two different directors on it. One person who understood how to shoot action and another person who didn't. So that's a big drawback for this movie that is going for a lot of that action scene. And also I should say, for any newcomers to this franchise that haven't played the video games or aren't familiar with it, from seeing the trailers you might expect that this takes place in the Spanish Inquisition times all the way through the movie, or at least a majority of the way through the movie. And it really doesn't. It's a very similar structure to the first game where you get a lot of setup with Callum in Abstergo, you get a brief few minutes in Spain, and then it cuts back to modern day with Callum and all the turmoil there. And it's not a continuous narrative in the Spain sequences either. There are a lot of scenes that end abruptly, and then next time you come back, a few weeks, a few months have passed. And I'm going to bring this up in spoilers, but there's a scene towards the end in Spain, and then when it picks up again a few minutes later, the bridge between that, I have no idea what happened. They really needed to explain that. It almost felt like I had missed a big chunk of the movie and they'd skipped so far ahead they hadn't explained how the previous one had ended. I'll get into that in spoilers though. I need to talk about the music as well. Jed Kurzel did the music on this one, the younger brother to the director Justin Kurzel. He worked with him on Macbeth, which I thought was not a very memorable score, but it was very atmospheric and eerie, and it really worked for that movie and the style they went for. The music in this film is terrible. There is no memorable track at all. It all bleeds into the background. And it doesn't feel like he utilised the setting of Spain well in the score at all. At least not on watching the film. Maybe if I listen to the score on its own, I'll pick up on some of those influences. But it really is probably one of the most forgettable scores I've ever heard, which again is a shame. If you look at the Assassin's Creed franchise, especially with Assassin's Creed 2, 3 and Black Flag, the soundtracks are amazing, the main themes are memorable, and even when you listen to them now, it transports you right back to the time that you played that video game for the first time. I especially get that with Assassin's Creed 2, and you just don't get anything like that with the music in this film, which, again, could have amplified those action scenes if you had that memorable score, if you had a theme tied to the character, or a theme tied to the assassins and a theme tied to the Templars. I think you really could have brought the emotion into those scenes and the leitmotifs of the certain different factions. I think it could have worked really well. Fortunately, we don't get anything like that at all. So I guess I'll go into my positives and negatives now, my overall opinion, and then I'll move into spoilers. So my positives: the location shooting is great, and the shots of the parkour and the stunt work that you can see when the camera's pulled back are breathtaking to watch. And in those moments, that is when it truly is a great video game adaptation, where because they shot so much of it in camera, and even when they don't shoot some stuff in camera, we get these beautiful shots of like an eagle flying overhead, and it's all one shot, and we follow this eagle all across the landscape. We get a great geographical sense of where everything is, and the landscape, the sense of the land. It's fantastic to watch. Also, the costumes. I love the costumes of the assassins. They've brought the iconic hoods back, the blades where they have to sever one of their own fingers for the hidden blade to come out. All that stuff's in the video game and is present in the movie. Loved all that stuff. My negatives were the weak story, the lack of characterization or personality in anyone, which rendered all the action scenes and the stakes of the story completely inert, alongside the continuous use of shaky cam, which really detracts from the action scenes. Which ultimately leaves you with a very dull and forgettable experience. And for Assassin's Creed, with this level of fan base and this level of recognition and all the infinite possibilities you can do with this franchise, it really does kind of leave you underwhelmed at the end. And as a fan of the video games, saying that, that's really disappointing, especially because I was hoping that this could actually be the first truly great video game movie. And I think the next one's going to be Tomb Raider, which is the reboot of that franchise with Alicia Vikander, so I guess I'm shifting all my hopes onto that one now. But in terms of Assassin's Creed, it really did leave me underwhelmed, and if it's doing that to a fan of the franchise, I'm sure it's going to do that to people who aren't familiar with this franchise as well. So that'll do for my spoiler-free section. I'll move into spoilers now. As I said, I really don't have much to talk about in the spoiler section at all. The first element I want to bring up is that lack of characterization, which was most prominent for me with the character of Maria, who is an assassin in the flashback sequences with Michael Fassbender. We get the hints of a relationship developing there, but the two characters are completely devoted to the creed, and there's a lot of scenes where they're captured, for example, and she says, "If I need to die, don't cry for me," or anything like that. "I will willingly give my life for the cause, as will you, if the tables were turned." And there's a scene later on in the film where it comes to a standoff, basically, and she's held at knife point, and Michael Fassbender's got the guy that he needs to kill, and it's the whole drop the knife situation, basically. Michael Fassbender does, but the guy kills the character of Maria. And that scene would have been fantastic and really emotional if we'd have got any sense of character or discussion or dialogue between these characters. We get a scene where he rescues her, and that's basically it. It's trying to have those emotional moments. It's trying to hit those emotional beats of the film, and they're not justified when you don't have the setup for it. And I know it's difficult because this movie is about 2 hours long, which I think is probably a decent running time for this kind of film. But because you do have the two narratives with Callum in the present and Aguila in the past, you do need to devote equal time to it, so you care for both characters. Although it's played by the same guy, they are very different characters that have a knock-on effect in each other's timelines. And it might not even be that bad if one side of the character was totally developed and we cared about them, and the other one, because of the lack of screen time, you could kind of get away with it and just pin it on awesome Assassin's Creed action. But when they fail on both, the faults really do become prominent. And I would have loved to have seen some in-depth characterization to Aguila. He could have been a very interesting character. Why did he want to join this order? What's in it for him? Let's see this relationship between him and Maria, and his mentor figure as well, who is killed, and there's no emotion. He just kind of looks at him like, well, that sucks. And then he goes on about his day. There's a lot of these missed opportunities. Now, a video game does have the benefit here where you have like 9, 10, 11, 12 hours, however long the actual campaign of the story is. And you do spend a lot of time in that historical setting purely because it's a video game and that's how the game is engineered, and it's a completely different medium to film. I understand that you need to cut some corners somewhere, you need to condense everything to get it into a 2-hour running time, but I do think they could have better handled their time, and character always trumps spectacle. Both are absolutely necessary in this kind of film for Assassin's Creed, and you do want to see that awesome action, but you can have that with great characterization as well, and it's such a missed opportunity in this film. Also wanted to bring up the fact that I touched on earlier about how a scene will end and then pick up later in the film so many weeks or months after. Most of those are fine and you can usually catch up and know what the situation is. However, there was one scene, which is probably the best scene in the film, where after Maria is killed, Michael Fassbender goes on the run and is cornered on this bridge by everyone. He's going after this guy who's got the Apple of Eden. He's chasing him. He's almost got him, and then he is pinned on this drawbridge with loads of people with crossbows. He's blocked off on the bridge. He's got nowhere to go. The guy with the Apple of Eden's gloating, saying basically, "You've lost." Opened fire on him, and he does a leap of faith off the bridge into the water below. That was a great scene. That was probably my favourite of the film. Then we pick up later on, and I was expecting him to try and find this guy who's got the Apple of Eden, or maybe find him in a public crowded spot, do some sneaking around where you hide in a group of people like you do in the video game, and actually assassinate him and attain the Apple of Eden. But when it picks up, he's already got the apple. Like, it's in his possession. So I was very disconnected from that because I thought the whole setup they were going for with these flashback sequences was going to be Aguila trying to acquire that apple, and we get to see how he does that. But it just cuts. He has it. I guess he killed the guy. I guess he found him. I guess he got it off camera. Really disappointed with that because I think they could have done a great scene with that. Again, homaging the video game series that came before it. Maybe get some more iconography in there from the game too. And really, all I need to talk about now is the end. And it does sequel bait. Whether this is going to get a sequel, I don't know. Looking at the budget for this film, it was done on a $125 million budget. So far, this has made $203.2 million. This is according to Wikipedia. So, and then on top of that, you need to take into consideration the sheer amount of advertising that this movie had. And I honestly think that this movie had a lot. You saw a lot of trailers, TV spots for this thing. Every bus I saw drive by seemed to have a poster for Assassin's Creed. So, I mean, this thing's been everywhere. So usually you double the budget for the advertising, and if that's the case, this movie has made a loss. And I think they were looking for bigger numbers for this, especially with the fan base of the video games. So whether we're going to get a sequel, I don't think it's going to happen at this point, but you never know. This film does end where Marion Cotillard looks at a vision, which I believe is herself as an assassin. Although she's working for the Templars at Abstergo, it looks like she's got some ties to the assassins, and maybe they could develop that more and her past, really bring in that conflict, which this film didn't do really. And at the end of the movie, Callum goes to assassinate her father, Jeremy Irons. Does so. This was done as a power play on Marion Cotillard's part, who will now become the new leader of Abstergo. At least that's how it sets it up. And she wants to try and retrieve the Apple of Eden that Michael Fassbender's character steals at the very end of this film. So there are some story threads which could link into a very compelling sequel. They could develop the characters a lot more, go really in depth into it. But if this is the foundation, the problem with this film is that I just don't care. I don't care about any of these characters, despite the talent involved in it. And it's such a shame because, just as what I've said, that could be a fantastic story for the sequel. If we'd have been given that characterization and depth to everyone in this, you could have then been pumped to see a sequel for this film and to see where they can take the characters, which new historical settings they could go to. So, big missed opportunity with this one, but that's basically all I can talk about in spoilers. So that'll do it for my review on Assassin's Creed. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let me know what you thought of this movie. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent about it? Let me know. Also, if you're a fan of the video games, let me know which your favourite one is. Mine, personally, I think a lot of people's is Assassin's Creed 2. But if you have another one, please do drop me a comment and let me know. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, as we're getting closer to Academy Awards season, there'll be many more movie reviews as well. I'm pretty much going to be at the cinema every single day this week, checking out new releases. There will be a review on Martin Scorsese's Silence, Manchester by the Sea, Lion, and Split. Hopefully all this week, but it might go into next week. So please do hit that subscribe button. It is the best way to keep updated with all of our content. There'll be trailer reactions from me as well, as and when trailers crop up. So until the next video, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.